Hello, welcome to the very first lesson on SPSS. In this lesson, we look at the SPSS interface, the two major windows we have in SPSS, the various tabs we need to know to be able to analyze data effectively with SPSS. We also look at how to define variables in SPSS. And lastly, we will look at how to enter data and how to import data as well in SPSS. So let's jump straight into it. I have SPSS on my desktop, so I'm just going to open it from here. I'll close this first window that pops up, and this is the actual interface of SPSS. So SPSS has two major windows or two major views, which are the variable view and the data view. I'll come back shortly to explain these ones in detail, but let's look at the other parts of SPSS. Just like other software, SPSS has the title bar, which usually shows the word untitled, indicating that we've not saved this file. And below the title bar, we have the menu bar, which contains tabs like File, Edit, View Data, and the others here. Among all these tabs, the most used one is the Analyze, which is used for most of the statistical analysis in SPSS. Other frequently used ones include the File, which is used to open, import, or save our data. We also use Transform most of the times to compute or recode variables, and then the graphs also is used most of the time to generate graphs or charts to visualize our data. And just below the menu bar, we have the toolbar or the quick access toolbar, and as the name suggests, it provides quick access to most of the items or most of the functions you can find using the menu bar. For example, instead of going to File to open or import data, we can simply click on this folder icon to do same. And we also have this save icon here, which is used to save the data. And this icon right here too is used to access recently used functions or recently used dialogues. So let's go back to the two most important windows or the two major views in SPSS, starting with the variable view. So I'm already in the variable view. This is the data view. This is the variable view. So I'm in the variable view. And what is the variable view used for? It is used to enter the names of our variables together with their properties. And when we say a variable, it simply refers to what you want to measure about our population or our sample, depending on the kind of research that you are doing or the kind of test we want to do. So let's say we want to know whether males are taller than females, or there's a claim that on average males are taller than females. So we need data to verify this claim. But before we can even collect the data, we need to define our variables. That is what we want to measure about our sample. So for the hypothesis I just stated that males on average are taller than females, what are the two variables here? The first variable is gender. So I'm going to type the first variable, gender, and after typing it, I'll click on enter. So when I click on enter, you see that SPSS fills the other columns with the properties of this variable. So I'm going to take time to explain these properties. So the type refers to the category of the variable gender or any variable that we enter. So I've entered gender here, and the category of the variable gender, it is actually categorical variable. In SPSS, string is the same as categorical variable, but I'm not going to choose string because I'm going to encode this variable gender with numbers. When I say encode, I mean I will assign values of 1 and 2. 1 for male and 2 for female, and I'll do that when I get to this property, the values. So because I'm going to encode this variable gender, although it's a categorical or qualitative variable, because I'm going to assign values, I'll just leave it as numeric. And encoding simply means changing categorical variables into numeric variables. So since I'm going to encode it, I can leave this part as numeric. And by leaving this one as numeric or by encoding it, it allows to extend the kind of analysis we can do with it. If I make this one string, I can do limited kind of analysis with it, like doing descriptive statistics to find the frequencies of each category. That is what I can do with it. So I'm going to leave it as numeric, and I'll be able to perform advanced analysis with it if I want to. And let's go to the next property. Next property here is width, and the width refers the number of characters we want this variable to accept. So you have male, female, and since I'm going to encode it into values of 1 and 2, I can even reduce it to 1, but I'm going to just leave it at the default. Then the next property, decimals, the number of decimal places we want to have for this variable. So I don't want to have decimal places for the variable gender. If it is 1, I just want it to be 1, not 1.00. So I'm just going to reduce the decimal to 0 by clicking on this down arrow. Then we come to the next property, which is the label. and the label refers to a brief description we give to this variable gender. So for the gender here, it can contain spaces, but this label property allows you to give a description, a brief description of your variable, and it allows for spaces. So you can say gender of respondent. You can also type the questionnaire here. So let's say for gender of respondent, before we collect data from our respondents, we need to change these variables into questions in our questionnaire. So let's say for the variable gender, we asked what is your gender. So you can type that one here at the label side. And I'm just going to type gender of respondent. So gender of respondent, I think this is okay. So gender of respondent, that is a description. So when you perform any kind of analysis, you see this gender of respondents on top of the analysis, and it makes it easy to explain or easy to interpret your results. So now let's move to the next property, which is the values. This value property is very important for categorical variables, and it's only categorical variables that we set these values, because for categorical variables, we mostly know the categories beforehand. We know the categories that we are going to have beforehand. So gender, for instance, I know that I'm going to have male and female. I can add others, but for here I'll add male and female. If I'm going to have only these two, I know. If I'm going to have others in addition, I know it beforehand, so I can encode that, and I know that all respondents are going to fall within these categories. But for numeric variables like height, we do not have to encode, because we are going to have a lot of unique values for height. Height is going to differ from person to person. So for numeric variables, we do not encode. So we only encode categorical variables like gender, religious affiliation, political affiliation, income level, educational level, race, marital status. We only encode these categorical variables because you mostly know the categories you are going to have beforehand. But for height, you can't know the height of somebody beforehand, and we are going to have a lot of unique values, so you can't encode numeric variables. You have to understand that. So for this categorical variable gender, let me show you how to encode it. So you click on these three dots here, then the values you are going to assign. So the first value is what? 1, and I'll come to the label side, type male. So male, then I'll click on add, and type 2 for female. I'll type female, click on add. After adding all the categories I want to add, I'll click on OK. So now I've encoded this variable gender, 1 for male and 2 for female. So when I go to the data view and I'm collecting my data, instead of typing male, I'll just enter 1. And for female, if the respondent is a female, I'll just enter 2. Now let's come to the next property, which is the missing. This is where we specify a number for missing values. I'm not going to do anything here. And the next property, columns. The columns refers to the width, how wide we want the column for this variable gender to be when we switch the data view. So it's now 8. So when I switch the data view, see that the size or the width for all the columns are the same. But if I come here, go to the columns property and increase this one to, let's say, 16 or 17, when I switch back to the data view, see that this one has become wider than all the remaining ones. So that is for the column. So I'm just going to reduce it to the default, which is 8. Then the next property, align, refers to how you want our data to be aligned in the data view. I'm just going to leave it at right. Then we come to the measure as the next property. So the measure also refers to the level of measurement. If you've done some kind of statistics, I believe you've heard about levels of measurement, where we have 4 levels of measurement: 2 for categorical variables and 2 for numeric variables. So the 2 for categorical variables are the nominal and ordinal, and for numeric variables we have interval and ratio. But in SPSS we have only 3 categories. We have the nominal, we have the ordinal, and scale for all numeric variables. So these two, ordinal and nominal, are for what? Are for categorical variables or qualitative variables like gender. The gender is specifically nominal because we cannot rank gender. For variables which cannot be ranked, categorical variables which cannot be ranked, we say they are nominal variables. So like gender, like skin color, like race, we can't rank them, so we say they are nominal. If we can rank them, they become ordinal. Like income level, level of education, the class that a student graduates with, they are all ordinal. But for gender, the nominal variable. So the measure is also very important. And the last property here is what? Row. For the row, I'm not going to do anything there, but it simply refers to the role this variable is playing in our analysis. So we have input The input refers to the independent variables, and we have target as dependent variables. So I'm just going to leave this one. So now I've briefly explained all the properties. Not all these properties are needed to be able to perform your analysis. Some are very important, some too are not. For the variable name, you can't do away without it. The type too is important to set, but for the weight and decimals, if you don't set it, it's not going to affect your analysis. And the label too, you can leave it. Just that when you set it or when you write a label for it, it makes your interpretation or analysis easy to understand. And the values is only important for categorical variables. We encode only categorical variables because we know the categories beforehand and we set them here. For the missing, you can leave it. For the columns, you can leave it. You can leave all these. The next important one too is the measure. For the measure too, you need to set it either nominal, ordinal, or when it is numeric, you set it to scale. So let's go to the next variable. For the hypothesis I stated, or the research to find out whether males are taller than females, the next thing we need to measure, that is the next variable, is height. So I'm going to type height and I'll click on enter. So we have the properties here filled by the SPSS software. So height is numeric, so I'm not going to change anything. The weight, I'm not going to change. Decimals, I'm just going to leave the decimals as well. And the label, let's just say height in centimeters. Then the values, since it's a numeric variable, we are going to leave it as none because we don't know the height of our respondent and we need to leave it open. For missing columns, I'm not going to adjust anything here. And when I come to the measure, I will choose scale since it's a numeric variable. So that is that. So for the question that I stated, I just need these two variables, gender and height. So with only these two variables, I'll be able to answer my question, or I'll be able to determine whether males are taller than females on average. So these are the only two variables I need. But you have to know that there's no limit to the number of variables you can have in a research, and it all depends on the questions you want to answer. Let's say I also wanted to know whether there's any relationship between age and height. So I could have a third variable, age, or I want to know the relationship between height and weight. I could add weight as well. So the number of variables you can have is unlimited, or it's not limited to any number, and it depends on the kind of questions or the kind of analysis you want to do. So after defining all your variables, entering their names and setting the properties, just go to the data view to enter the actual data from your respondents. So the data view is for our respondents. So this number 1, this row 1 is for respondent 1. If you are going to have 20 respondents, it means you are going to fill from row 1 to row number 20, where row 1 is for respondent 1 or participant 1, and row 20 will be for participant 20. And the first participant is going to respond to all our variables. So if you had 5 variables, that means respondent 1 is going to respond to all these 5 variables. But here you have only 2 variables. So let's say our first respondent is a male. So gender, we enter 1. We've encoded it already. We enter 1, then click on enter. See, because we encoded it, when I entered the 1 and I clicked on enter, the male appeared automatically. Then let's say the height for this person is 170 centimeters. Click on enter. Go to the next row, participant 2. Let's say participant 2 was a female, so I'll just type 2 because I've already encoded it. Click on enter and the female pops up. And let's say the height for this one too is 168. So this is how you'll be entering the data for all the respondents. But because this is a tutorial, if I say I'm going to enter for all 20 respondents, or let's say 10, it's going to take time. I have a sample data in Excel, so I can just copy and paste here. So I'm going to delete this, then copy and paste the data I have in Excel. So I'll right click here. I first selected the 2, so I selected the 2 like this. Now right click, click on clear. Okay, so the data I entered have been removed. I'm going to copy some data I have in Excel. So I have the data here. Let me open it. So this is the data. So I have gender, I have age, I have height. But this time I need only gender and height. So I'm going to copy the gender. I'll select everything. Control C to copy. And I'll go to SPSS. The first cell is selected. So I'll just Control V to paste. And you see it was 1 2 1 2 ones and twos, but because I've already encoded it, it appeared as male, female, and the height. So I'm just going to copy from there. The first one, select everything, copy, come to SPSS, paste it here. So after entering the data like this, we can proceed to do all kind of analysis we want to do with it. So for this one, if I want to compare the height between males and females. I'm going to perform a t-test, but I'm not going to do it now. We have a lesson for that. We've learned how to define our variables in the variable view with their properties. We've learned how to enter data manually. The last thing I want to show you to bring this lesson to an end is to show you how to import data. So if you have your data in Excel like this, you don't even need to go to the SPSS variable view to type the names of your variables. Go to the data view to enter the data. You can simply import, and the variable names will be sent to the variable view, and the actual data will be sent to the data view. So let's see how we can do that. I'm going to close this Excel file and I will import it here in SPSS. So how do we import? Just click on File, Import Data. It's an Excel data, so we choose Excel from here. Then this is the data I want to import. I can just double click on it or click on it, then click on Open here. So you see this one is ticked, read variable names from first row of data. If this one is not ticked, you just have to tick it. So the SPSS will know that the first row is for the variable names, and they will be sent to the variable view as well. So I'll just click on OK. It has been imported. We are in the data view now. You can see gender, age, height. When I switch the variable view, you see the variable names here. I did not have to come and type them here. They appeared automatically. And the type to numeric, I won't change anything here. So the only editing I need to do here is to go to the value side for this variable gender, because it is a categorical variable and I need to encode it. I'll just come to the variable side here to edit it. And when I go to the data view, just 1, 2, 1, 2. So when I do any analysis with it, it will be difficult to interpret if I don't understand that the 1 is for male and the 2 is for female. So what I need to do is to come to the variable view and edit in the value side after importing. So 1 for male, add, 2 for female, click on add, and OK. So now when I switch to the data view, see that the male and the female has come. So if you import data, just edit the value side of the categorical variables. But for the numeric, you just leave them. Then the labels too, I think this one came, but the remaining did not come. So you can type the labels too as well. So you can type gender of respondents here, and the age too, you can type age of respondents or the questionnaire you use, like what is your age. So this brings us to the end of this lesson. We've learned something about the SPSS interface, the variable view, the data view, what they are used for. We've learned about the other parts, the tabs here. In the next lesson, we'll be looking at descriptive statistics. We're looking at how to perform descriptive statistics for both categorical and numeric variables. So thank you very much for watching. See you in the next lesson.